Welcome to my channel, where every story pulls you into a new mystery. Every case tests your instincts, and every clue brings us one step closer to the truth. In today's case, we follow Hercule Poirot as he uncovers a puzzle that wasn't hidden in a locked drawer, whispered in the corridors, or written in a secret diary. It was concealed in something far more delicate, the Winter Garden key, holding secrets only the sharpest mind could unlock. Stay with me till the end, because the answer to this riddle isn't just clever, it's unforgettable. So, pick up your cup of tea and get comfortable, because today's case is worth every second. Until the very end. Chapter 1. The Hook. The inciting incident grand estate of Sir Edward Davenport lay nestled against the snowy backdrop of the Surrey hills, a silent sentinel in the bleak midwinter. A crumbling stone wall bordered the sprawling garden, its once vibrant roses now reduced to brittle stems that trembled under the weight of an icy wind. Snowflakes drifted lazily from the pale sky, dusting the immaculate grounds like powdered sugar on a cake. It was here, in this desolate winter garden, that the shocking crime would unfold. Inside the estate, the atmosphere was one of rare excitement. The Davenports, an old and wealthy family, had opened their doors to a select group of guests, gathered for an exclusive winter gala. The high ceilings of the drawing room were adorned with ivy and holly, sparkling with fairy lights that twinkled in time with the muffled sounds of the string quartet. Champagne flutes clinked, laughter echoed, and beneath the festive exterior, there were whispers. Whispers of an impending change in the family fortune. Whispers of Sir Edward's intent to make an unexpected announcement about the future of his estate. It was amidst this glittering fouet of wealth and happiness that tragedy struck. The first scream came from the direction of the Winter Garden. It was a woman's cry, sharp and panicked, followed by the rapid scurrying of feet. In an instant, the guests at the gala froze, their champagne glasses suspended mid-air, their conversations fading into a stunned silence. They turned in unison toward the direction of the cry, some standing in confusion, others instinctively beginning to move. Within moments, the doors to the Winter Garden swung open, and Lady Violet Davenport, her face drained of color, rushed in with trembling hands clutching at her shawl. "It's terrible. It's dreadful," she cried, her voice trembling. "Sir Edward, he's dead." A wave of disbelief rippled through the room. Sir Edward Davenport, the patriarch of the family, was not merely dead, he had been found in the Winter Garden. His body slumped awkwardly against the ancient stone fountain. A key, a small, intricately carved thing, clutched in his cold hand. But the most alarming discovery was the note pinned to his chest, a message scrawled in hurried, trembling handwriting. "The one who holds the key is the key." The guests exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether this was the start of a tragic accident or something far more sinister. The estate, which had once felt like a refuge from the world's troubles, now seemed suffocating and claustrophobic. The scent of flowers in the garden no longer felt comforting, but instead, thick with the weight of unspoken secrets. By the time the authorities arrived, the shock had already begun to settle into unease. Sir Edward's body was carefully examined by the local doctor, but the cause of death was uncertain. No signs of violence were immediately apparent, no obvious wounds, no poison chalice, no sharp implements. Yet the circumstances, the cryptic message, and the mysterious key led the police to conclude that foul play had indeed occurred. The estate's guests were all immediately questioned, and it was soon clear that each had something to hide, something to gain, or something to lose. The guests' reactions were mixed. Some showed genuine concern, others irritation, and one, in particular, seemed almost to calm, to compose for a man who had just witnessed a murder. That was when Hercule Poirot's name was mentioned. Among the assembled group of guests was a certain Inspector Higgins, a diligent but somewhat conventional officer, who immediately dispatched a telegram to London. There was only one man capable of unraveling this intricate knot of mystery, and the telegram read as follows: "Murder most foul. Request assistance. Your presence is needed. Poirot, ever punctual, arrived 2 days later at the Davenport estate. With his characteristic precision, his small frame and meticulously groomed mustache belied a mind sharper than any blade. A mind that could dissect a murder as easily as one might peel an orange. He was greeted by the grim scene, Sir Edward's lifeless body still lying in the garden, the key still in his hand, and the cryptic message mocking them all done as he stepped into the estate. His eyes quickly took in every detail. He studied the faces of the guests. Each was a potential suspect. Each was holding something back. Poirot's mind whirred into action, though he did not immediately speak. He was observing, calculating, and waiting. He walked slowly to the winter garden, carefully avoiding the crime scene, but his sharp eyes took in the placement of the body, the state of the garden, and the key that had led to Sir Edward's demise. Poirot turned, facing the assembled group. "My friends," he said, his voice calm and even, "we are standing at the threshold of a mystery that begins with a key and a cryptic message. But remember, nothing is as it seems. There's much more to this case than meets the eye. And as always, I shall use my little gray cells to find the truth." The guests exchanged uneasy glances. They were now in the hands of Hercule Poirot, the man who had solved the unsolvable, who had seen through layers of deception and misdirection. But in this case, would even Poirot be able to decipher the truth? The game was afoot, and it would take more than just logic to crack this case. It would take a deep understanding of human nature, and understanding that Poirot alone possessed. And so, with the key in hand, he began his investigation, knowing that the path ahead would be fraught with twists and turns, psychological games, and a truth that no one could have anticipated. Chapter 2. The first close morning after Poirot's arrival brought with it a quiet stillness, as though the estate itself were holding its breath. Snow had fallen overnight, cloaking the winter garden in white, rendering it both beautiful and eerie. Inspector Higgins, bundled in a thick wool coat, led Poirot toward the scene of the crime. The body had been moved to the library, but Poirot insisted they visit the original location. The garden was enclosed on all sides by glass and iron, more conservatory than wilderness, and despite the bitter cold, a few evergreen plants clung to life in tall clay pots. The stone fountain, at the center, once the pride of Lady Violet's seasonal displays, was frozen solid. "This is where the body was discovered?" Poirot asked softly. "Yes," said Higgins. "Lady Violet found him here at around 10 in the evening. She claims she came out to fetch him for a toast. And the key?" Higgins nodded, still clutched in his right hand. "A small brass key with a floral design on the bow. Doesn't match any lock we've found so far. Not the garden shed, not the cellar, not even the strong boxes in Sir Edward's study." Poirot knelt beside the fountain and observed the ground. "You say it snowed last night, but when did the snow begin?" "About midnight," Higgins replied. "Then the absence of footprints around the fountain before the snow is curious. Look, there are only Lady Violet's faint tracks leading in and out, and those must be hers, for they head back toward the main house." The realization hovered in the air. No struggle, Poirot murmured. No disarray. He came here alone or willingly met someone here. They returned indoors. Poirot's eyes lingered on every detail of the corridor that led from the winter garden to the main hall. A cracked tile by the baseboard, a half-burned candle in a gilt holder, a discarded lace glove beneath the hall table. He said nothing, but each anomaly was noted. In the library, Sir Edward's body had been carefully laid on a leather couch and covered with a woolen throw. Dr. Finch, the family's trusted physician, stood by with a glass of brandy in one hand. No sign of physical trauma, the doctor confirmed. No visible wounds, no bruises or lacerations. Pupils constricted, lips slightly blue. I suspect poisoning, possibly digitalis, but I'll need confirmation. Poirot folded his arms. And the note? Higgins handed him a clear envelope. Inside was the folded parchment, the writing slanted and erratic. The one who holds the key is the key. No fingerprints other than Sir Edward's, Higgins said. And the ink is unusual dark green, almost like verdigris. Poirot turned to Dr. Finch. And the time of death? Approximately between 9:30 and 10 p.m., Finch said. No more precise than that, I'm afraid. Poirot nodded slowly. Then Lady Violet found him almost immediately. Curious timing. Curious? Higgins asked. Yes, said Poirot, because it means the murderer took great risk striking so close to the hour when he would be missed. That suggests a sense of urgency. Or desperation. Poirot's gaze swept the room. Has anything else gone missing from the house? Higgins hesitated. Well, there's one oddity, Sir Edward's journal. He kept a daily ledger in his desk. It's gone, stolen after the murder? No, Higgins said. The housekeeper claims it was missing before dinner. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Interesting. So either the theft and the murder are separate or the motive for the murder began. Before dinner was served, a knock at the door interrupted them. A footman entered quietly. Begging pardon, sir, but Miss Cecily Davenport has requested a moment with Monsieur Poirot. She's in the music room, merci, said Poirot. I shall join her shortly. Once alone with Higgins, Poirot examined the brass key, now resting on a velvet cloth atop the writing desk. You see, mon ami, he said, this key is not merely functional. Look closely. The pattern, the weight, the engraving, it suggests a personal significance. He gently tapped the parchment containing the note. And this message it is not meant to obscure, but to declare something. The key is more than physical. Perhaps it is symbolic. Higgins frowned. Symbolic of what? Poirot allowed himself the faintest smile. Ah, that is what we must discover. But first let us speak with Miss Cecily. I believe she may hold one of the first real threads in this unraveling tapestry. He took the brass key with him, slipping it into a small leather pouch behind him. The wind howled faintly through the old chimney, as though the house itself whispered secrets it no longer wished to keep. Chapter 3. The Gathering of Suspects. Music room at Davenport Hall had long been a sanctuary of harmony, filled with antique instruments and brocade curtains that softened the morning light. But this morning, it felt taut with unease. Cecily Davenport, Sir Edward's niece, stood by the harpsichord, fingers absently brushing its ivory keys. She was tall, in her late 20s, with chestnut hair pinned in a style too careful for someone who claimed to dislike attention. Poirot entered quietly. Cecily turned, her face composed, but her eyes betrayed the faintest tremor. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice low. Thank you for seeing me. He offered a courteous nod. Mademoiselle Cecily, it is I who must thank you. In times of grief, it is no small thing to seek clarity. She hesitated, then crossed the room, hands clasped in front of her. It's about the key, Poirot said, the mysterious key from the winter garden. I've seen it before, she said quickly. Not often but once, in my uncle's study. He kept it in a small leather pouch in the back drawer. He never spoke of it. I thought it might belong to a family heirloom. Did he ever mention what it opened? No, she said, but I always assumed it had sentimental value. He was a secretive man, you see, especially these last months. Poirot studied her closely. And yet, you chose to share this now. Why? Because, she whispered, I think someone might have stolen it days before the gala. Who? Poirot asked gently. I don't know, Cecily admitted. But I saw something strange the night before the guests arrived. I passed by the study and saw the drawer open. The pouch was gone. I didn't think much of it at the time. Poirot nodded slowly. You are wise to speak now. Even a detail that seems insignificant may become the thread that unravels the truth. He left her with a respectful bow and returned to the drawing room, where Inspector Higgins had begun assembling the guests. One by one, they filed in 10 in total, not counting the staff. Lady Violet was first, Sir Edward's second wife. She was elegant but severe, draped in mourning black with a hint of theatrical flair. Her grief seemed genuine, though it clashed with the sharp glint in her eyes. Next came Major Alistair Grant, Sir Edward's old army friend. Broad-shouldered and weathered, he looked out of place amid the luxury. His voice was clipped, his gaze narrowed with suspicion. Following him was Miss Georgina Roke, the estate's financial adviser, precise, thin-lipped, with a constant air of calculation. She greeted Poirot coolly and offered condolences as though they were contractual. Then came Felix Harwood, the bohemian artist and distant cousin, who slouched into the room with a scarf looped dramatically round his neck. "Ghastly business," he muttered, lighting a cigarette without asking. Dr. Finch entered next, still in his overcoat, and took a seat in the corner, quietly observing. Poirot noticed how his fingers twitched slightly when Lady Violet looked his way. The last to arrive was Evelyn Maddox, Sir Edward's ward, a quiet, bookish girl of 19. She hovered near the doorway with a nervous energy. Her wide eyes darted from face to face. Poirot took his place near the hearth. "Mesdames and messieurs, thank you for joining me. I shall be brief, but I ask for candor. You were invited to this estate for a celebration. Instead, a tragedy has occurred. Sir Edward is dead, murdered." There was a collective stir, but Poirot raised a hand. "I intend to speak with each of you privately, but for now I ask, did any of you see Sir Edward after 9 o'clock last evening?" A pause, then Felix shrugged. "I passed him in the hall 9:30, perhaps. He seemed distracted. Did he speak to you?" Felix shook his head, just nodded, went toward the conservatory. Poirot turned to Major Grant. "And you, monsieur?" "I was in the study until just before 10, writing a letter. Didn't see him. Were you alone?" A pause. "Yes." Poirot's eyes lingered on him a second longer, then moved to Georgina. "I was on the phone in the East Wing lounge, speaking with a client. Sir Edward walked past but didn't stop. Was this call timed?" She blinked. "Yes, my firm logs them." "'Tis been," said Poirot. He looked around once more. "Each of you will be interviewed in due course, but remember, what seems minor now may prove vital. I ask only that you do not leave the estate." Felix scoffed. "Are we under suspicion?" Poirot gave a thin smile. "Everyone is, Monsieur Harwood. That is the nature of such things." As the group dispersed, murmuring uneasily, Poirot turned toward the frosted windows. Snow fell in silent sheets beyond the glass. Somewhere within this closed circle was a killer, and somewhere the truth buried like a seed in the frozen earth waited to bloom. Chapter 4. Poirot arrived. The afternoon air hung heavy with silence as a dark saloon car rolled up the long, winding drive of Davenport Hall. Snow crunched beneath its wheels, and mist clung low to the gardens like a secret that refused to lift. A uniformed footman opened the door, and out stepped a small, meticulously dressed man with a bowler hat perched atop his head, and a matching green valise in his hand. Hercule Poirot paused at the entrance, surveying the grand façade with a faint purse of the lips. "Ah," he murmured, "such grandeur, though I fear beneath the stone lies something altogether more unsavory inside." Inspector Higgins greeted him at the threshold with a relieved nod. "Monsieur Poirot, thank you for coming so swiftly. It is not every day one is summoned to a murder so poetic," Poirot replied, brushing a speck of lint from his immaculate lapel. "A winter garden, a cryptic key, and a cryptic note. But come, mon ami, tell me what of the people inside." Higgins gestured toward the drawing room. "They're all still here. I've taken statements, but no clear suspect yet. It's a close circle family, old friends, one or two outsiders. Every one of them had some connection to Sir Edward. And motive? That too, Poirot said. Then let us begin as always with the people. The crime tells us how. The people tell us why. He entered the drawing room, his presence immediately shifting the energy. Conversation ceased. Eyes turned. He was not a tall man, nor an imposing one, but the stillness he carried was commanding. Each movement was deliberate, each glance measured. Lady Violet rose first. "You must be Monsieur Poirot," she said, her tone both curious and guarded. "It's kind of you to come. My husband Edward, he admired your methods, though he never admitted as much, madam." Poirot said with a short bow, "My condolences. Your husband's death, it is most unnatural." Her expression tightened, though she masked it quickly. "Yes, terribly sudden." Poirot's gaze lingered a moment before he turned to Major Grant. "And you, Monsieur, were a comrade of Sir Edward?" Grant's shoulders stiffened. "We served together, Mesopotamia, years ago." Poirot gave a small nod. "War forges bonds. And grudges, no." Grant bristled. "If you've something to ask it." "Not yet," Poirot said calmly. "For now, I only gather impressions." He circled the room slowly, pausing by Georgina Roke. Her fingers were clasped tightly in her lap. Her eyes tracked him with careful precision. "You handled Sir Edward's financial affairs?" "I do," she said crisply. "Or did. I manage portfolios for several families." Poirot tapped a finger to his chin. "And tell me, was Sir Edward's portfolio troubled?" Georgina hesitated, just a beat too long. "No more than any other in this market." Poirot moved on, reaching Felix Harwood, who sprawled carelessly across a chair, cigarette ash dangerously close to falling onto the velvet. "A curious vocation, art," Poirot said. "It makes one observe what others ignore." Felix blew smoke toward the ceiling. "Observation's not the same as judgment, indeed. Yet both are dangerous in excess." Next was Dr. Finch, standing apart with his arms crossed. "You examined the body?" Poirot asked. "Yes. As I told Inspector Higgins, no marks of violence. I suspect poison. And your relationship with the deceased?" "I was his physician." "Nothing more." Poirot gave a subtle tilt of the head. "But you knew him well. You knew the state of his health, his habits, his vulnerabilities." Finch stiffened. "I treat facts, not feelings. Yet feelings often shape facts, do they not?" Poirot murmured. Finally, he came to Evelyn Maddox. The young woman stood by the window, her reflection pale against the snow beyond. "You were his ward?" She nodded. "Since I was 15. He paid for my schooling, treated me kindly, but distantly." "You inherited nothing?" Poirot asked gently. "I don't know. His will hasn't been read. But I never expected anything." Poirot studied her for a moment longer. She did not flinch under his gaze, but something in her stillness intrigued him. As the guests were dismissed, Poirot remained by the hearth, warming his hands. Higgins approached, brow furrowed. "Well, they are a fascinating collection," Poirot said. "Each one cloaked in manners, each one holding something close to the chest. But the eyes, Inspector, the eyes always betray what the mouth conceals. And your impression?" Poirot's gaze drifted toward the door. "There is fear here, yes, but also calculation. Someone in this house knew precisely what they were doing." He pulled the brass key from his pocket, turning it in his fingers. "And this is no ordinary key. It is the beginning of everything. I feel it, outside." Snow continued to fall, blanketing the grounds in silence. Inside, Poirot's mind had already begun to work, not with evidence, not yet, but with the subtleties of character, the shape of lies, and the whisper of motive. Chapter 5. Initial interviews begin. Poirot began his formal inquiries the following morning, seated in Sir Edward's study, an austere room lined with books, hunting trophies, and a mahogany desk that still held the faint scent of pipe tobacco. Snow tapped gently against the leaded windows, and a small fire crackled in the hearth. Inspector Higgins sat in the corner with his notebook, though Poirot made it clear he preferred to ask the questions himself. The first to enter was Lady Violet. She moved with restrained elegance, her black crepe dress swishing softly against the parquet floor. She sat across from Poirot, spine stiff, hands folded in her lap. "Madam," Poirot began gently, "you were the one who discovered your husband, oui?" "Yes," she replied. "At precisely 10 o'clock. I had gone to fetch him for the toast. It was a tradition of ours, even when we hosted." "And when did you last see him alive?" "Around 8:30. He said he wished to walk alone in the winter garden to collect his thoughts, as he put it." Poirot leaned forward. "And did he seem troubled?" She hesitated. "Yes, he'd been distracted all week. Something had been weighing on him. Do you know what?" "No." She paused. "Though I suspect it had to do with Cecily." "Cecily?" Poirot raised an eyebrow. "His niece. He planned to change his will. I overheard him speaking to Georgina about it. I believe he intended to cut Cecily out. Did Cecily know?" "I couldn't say." Poirot offered a small nod. "Merci, madam. That will be all for now." Lady Violet left with a slight lift of her chin. Her grief was precise, but Poirot sensed control in her manner. He made a brief note and called for the next guest. Cecily Davenport entered, visibly uneasy. Her eyes flicked to the desk, then the hearth, as if imagining her uncle still seated there. "Mademoiselle Cecily," Poirot said kindly, "you told me yesterday you had seen the key before. In this very room?" "Yes, in the desk drawer." "And you said you believed it was taken the night before the gala?" She nodded. "I didn't see who took it. I only noticed the drawer had been left open." "Were you close with your uncle?" Cecily hesitated. "Not especially. He was formal. But I lived here. I tried to please him. Did you know he intended to alter his will?" Her face paled slightly. "No, I didn't. Why would he?" Poirot studied her carefully. Perhaps he felt disappointed? She looked down. He often seemed disappointed in everyone. "Merci," he said softly. "I will not keep you longer." After Cecily left, Poirot called in Major Grant. The ex-soldier stood as if still under inspection, his chin high, his hands behind his back. "Major," Poirot said, "you mentioned writing a letter the night Sir Edward died." "That's correct. To a friend in London." Poirot steepled his fingers. "You and Sir Edward served together, no?" "Years ago," Grant replied. "We had our differences, but we remained civil." "And what was your reason for attending the gala?" Grant's brow furrowed. "He invited me. Were you aware of any financial dealings between the two of you?" "None," Grant said tersely. "He offered me a loan once. I refused." Poirot let the silence stretch, then asked, "Did you know about the key?" Grant's expression shifted. "What key?" "Ah," Poirot said, smiling faintly. "Then perhaps not." Next came Georgina Roke. She sat neatly, hands clasped like a patient accountant awaiting a ledger to balance. "Miss Roke," Poirot began, "you advised Sir Edward on financial matters, non?" "Yes." "Was he in good standing?" "Better than most. His investments were conservative but stable." "Was there tension over his will?" Georgina hesitated. "He did speak of updating it. I drafted the paperwork, but he never signed." "Who was to be excluded?" "Cecily. And the beneficiaries?" "Lady Violet and Evelyn." Poirot tilted his head. "Not Major Grant?" "No, nor Felix." "And what of this key?" Georgina's lips thinned. "I saw it once, years ago. He told me it was for something he hoped to forget." "Curious," Poirot murmured. He dismissed her and called in Felix Harwood. The artist flopped into the chair with a theatrical sigh. "Tell me, Monsieur Harwood," Poirot said, "where were you at the time of the murder?" "I told the inspector I was upstairs in my room, sketching. Can anyone verify this? No, I work alone. You knew Sir Edward well? Barely. I was invited as a courtesy, I think. Some distant relation. And what of the key? Felix exhaled smoke. A key? What is this? A fairy tale? Poirot watched him for a moment, then nodded. That will be all. Finally, Evelyn Maddox entered, timid and pale. Miss Maddox, Poirot said gently. How did you come to live here? My parents died when I was 14. Sir Edward took me in, and he was kind. He was generous, but cold. I was grateful, of course. Did you expect to inherit anything? No, I assumed everything would go to Lady Violet. Poirot leaned forward slightly. And do you know of the key? She shook her head. Only what I overheard. Ceaselessly mentioning it once, in passing. Merci, mademoiselle, when Evelyn left. Poirot sat back and folded his hands. Well? Higgins asked. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Everyone lies, Inspector. Some out of fear, some out of guilt, and some because they are playing a game. He rose, slipping the brass key from his pocket. And in this game, the key is more than just a tool. It is bait. Chapter 6. First false Ledby late afternoon. The cold had intensified, frosting the corners of the library windows and muting the sounds of movement through the manor. Poirot sat in quiet thought beside the fire, while Inspector Higgins reviewed the statements with increasing frustration. One of them's lying, Higgins muttered. But which one? Poirot did not look up. Ah, mon ami, they are all lying each to protect something. But the lies are of different shapes. Some are merely for pride, others for survival. At that moment, Constable Briggs entered, hat in hand and cheeks pink from the wind. Sir, we found something. Higgins stood. Go on. In Major Grant's room, Briggs said. Tucked under the false bottom of a luggage trunk we found this. He handed over a velvet pouch. Higgins opened it carefully, revealing a small brown vial half full, with a faded label, Digitalis Purpurea. Poirot rose at once, his eyes narrowing. The same poison Dr. Finch suspected? Higgins asked. Indeed, Poirot said, voice calm but alert. A cardiac glycoside, extracted from foxglove. A subtle poison, non? Higgins wasted no time. Within 10 minutes, Major Grant was back in the study, standing rigidly before the fire, eyes dark with confusion or perhaps defiance. You've no right to search my belongings without cause, he growled. We had cause, Higgins snapped. You lied about the night of the murder. You said you were writing a letter, but no such letter exists. I never said I posted it, Grant said. I tore it up. Convenient, Higgins muttered. And what about the digitalis? Grant's jaw tightened. I have a heart condition, mild arrhythmia. The drug is prescribed. Poirot lifted a hand. Do you have a prescription? A doctor? I haven't needed it in years, Grant said. I carry it in case of emergencies. Edward knew that. Did anyone else? Lady Violet, Grant admitted. We'd spoken about it. She once had a scare during a hunting party. She thought I was going to faint. Poirot's gaze held steady. And yet you failed to mention any of this during our first conversation. Grant exhaled, visibly agitated. I don't enjoy being questioned like a criminal, Mesui, Poirot murmured. And yet you were a soldier, were you not? You must know truth told too late becomes indistinguishable from a lie. Grant looked away. When he was dismissed, Higgins turned eagerly to Poirot. That settles it, doesn't it? He had the motive. Sir Edward refused him financial help. He had the means digitalis. And he lied. Poirot held up a hand. None, mon ami. It is to perfect. Yes, a vial so easily found. In a false bottom. Yes, but not concealed cleverly. And tell me, if Major Grant wished to kill Sir Edward with poison, why not destroy the evidence? Why keep the vial? Higgins frowned. Maybe he panicked, or maybe it was placed, Poirot said softly, by someone who wanted us to look precisely where we did. The thought settled uneasily between them. And consider, Poirot continued, digitalis is not fast-acting. Its effects are cumulative hours, sometimes days. Sir Edward was found dead within the hour of retiring to the winter garden. His symptoms rapid onset. Blue lips suggest something faster, perhaps a concentrated dose, or perhaps not digitalis at all. Higgins sat heavily. So what now? Poirot tapped the key on the table in thought. Now, we wait. The murderer is growing confident. They believe the wrong man is under suspicion. That makes them careless. He stood and crossed to the window. Outside, Felix Harwood trudged through the snow in the rear garden, cigarette smoke curling above him like steam. Near the gate, Evelyn and Cecily walked in low conversation, their heads close together. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And so, he murmured, the stage shifts. Behind him, Higgins glanced again at the pouch. You're saying the poison was planted? Poirot did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked toward the hearth and said, almost to himself, the murderer is not clever in the way they believe. They improvise. But such improvisation reveals a flaw of fear. That is what I must uncover. There was a knock at the door. A footman entered with a note on a silver tray. Poirot took it, unfolded it carefully dot and fine. Looping script, it read, meet me in the east corridor at midnight. I know what the key opens. No signature. Just a blot of green ink in the lower corner. Poirot folded the note and placed it in his pocket, eyes gleaming with renewed intensity. The key, he whispered. At last, someone begins to show their hand. He turned to Higgins. Inspector, this could be it. Our suspect is no longer hiding in the shadows. They're drawing us into their web. Midnight in the east corridor. It's time to confront them. Higgins looked skeptical. You're sure about this, Poirot? Poirot's eyes were hard, resolute. The game has changed, mon ami. The murderer believes we are chasing the wrong lead, but they have made a critical mistake. They believe they can control the situation. They are about to learn that they cannot. The firelight cast long shadows over the room as Poirot continued to gaze out the window, his thoughts sharp and calculated. The evening had fallen into an unnatural stillness, the kind that often precedes a storm. I will need you to remain here, Inspector, Poirot said. I will go alone. Higgins looked at him, his face a mixture of concern and respect. At least take some of the constables with you. Poirot shook his head. No, this will be done by me, and me alone. If I am right, the confrontation will happen tonight, and I will need to confront them directly. There's no other way. Higgins nodded, though he clearly wanted to argue. Poirot could see the unease in his eyes. If I do not return by morning, you will know where to look. Poirot added with a small smile, but I am confident that we will have answers tonight. With that, Poirot turned to leave, his steps measured and deliberate. As he walked down the corridor toward the east wing, a quiet anticipation hummed in his chest. The time had come. The murderer was about to be revealed, and Poirot would stop at nothing to ensure that justice was served. The key, the poison, the lies, they were all part of the same puzzle, and tonight, Poirot was going to solve it once and for all. Chapter 7. The psychological gamut east corridor of Davenport Hall was seldom used, an aging wing, where the wallpaper had begun to peel, and the antique sconces flickered unreliably when the wind howled through the chimney shafts. At 5 minutes to midnight, Poirot stood alone beneath a faded oil portrait of a former Davenport matriarch, his gloved hands neatly folded behind his back. He had arrived early, of course. One does not allow anonymous invitations to dictate the rhythm of an investigation. He had spent the last hour revisiting every statement, weighing each pause and misdirection, not for what had been said but for what had been omitted. At precisely 12 o'clock, soft footsteps echoed down the corridor. Poirot turned. A figure emerged from the shadows. It was Evelyn Maddox. She approached hesitantly. glancing back over her shoulder before stopping a few feet from him. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know who else to trust. You wrote the note?" Poirot asked. "Yes, I used Georgina's stationery. I hoped it wouldn't be traced to me." Poirot inclined his head. "You were careful. I had to be. I think I know what the key opens." "Go on, mademoiselle." She took a breath. "There's a panel behind the grandfather clock on the 3rd floor. I found it once by accident when I was younger. It opens a hidden compartment in the wall. I never knew what it was for, but my uncle always kept it locked." "Have you checked it since the murder?" "No," she said. "I was afraid. But I saw Lady Violet near it yesterday. She said she was dusting, but she didn't have a cloth, just watching the clock." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "You have done well to tell me this." Evelyn looked down. "I didn't want to believe it could be her, but she was always so calm after his death." "To calm." Poirot gently placed a hand on her arm. "Truth is not always what we fear, mademoiselle. It is often what we least expect." He escorted her back to her room, offering a soft good night before returning to the study, where Higgins waited. Half asleep in a chair. "You look like a ghost," Higgins muttered, rubbing his eyes. Poirot smiled faintly. "I've seen one, perhaps, without elaboration." Poirot retrieved the brass key from his pocket and turned it over in his fingers. Its teeth were worn smooth, the brass dulled with age. No ordinary key. A key to something once meant to be hidden, not simply locked. "I shall test Evelyn's theory in the morning," Poirot said. "But tonight, we observe." The following morning, Poirot resumed his psychological offensive, not with accusations, but with well-placed provocations. His method was not to accuse, but to disturb the calm surface of each suspect's composure and watch. What rose to the top first was Georgina Roke. He invited her to breakfast in the solarium. "Tell me," he began over a modest plate of toast, "if Sir Edward's assets were to be redistributed after death, would that be within your professional purview?" She stiffened. "Naturally. I manage his trusts, but the estate lawyer handles the will. And if that will were altered or destroyed?" Georgina blinked. "Then the last known legal version would hold." "Why do you ask?" Poirot smiled. "Oh, just considering how precarious inheritance can be." A muscle twitched in her jaw later. He found Felix in the garden, painting thick, frantic brushstrokes across a canvas that looked more like chaos than composition. "Monsieur Harwood," Poirot said mildly, "your paintings, are they for pleasure or profession?" Felix shrugged. "They don't sell, but they keep me sane. And yet, you accept invitations to country estates. You live comfortably. How?" Felix gave a crooked smile. "Pity's a currency." Poirot tilted his head. "But not Sir Edward's, I think." "Hardly. He couldn't stand me. Thought I was a parasite. And were you?" Felix flinched, the smile fading. "What are you getting at?" "Only this," Poirot said softly. "If Sir Edward had truly meant to disinherit someone, he would do so with finality. But if he merely meant to provoke—" Felix looked away. Poirot left him with that thought by midday. Poirot had spoken again with Lady Violet, this time about the clock on the 3rd floor. "A dreadful old thing," she said. "I've asked Edward to remove it more than once." Poirot smiled. "And yet you were seen near it." She blinked. "I was dusting." Poirot offered a shallow nod. "It is strange," he said, "how time and secrets often share the same hiding place." Before she could respond, he excused himself. By afternoon, the calm in the house had shifted. Evelyn was more withdrawn, Cecily more alert. Felix had stopped painting. Georgina lingered in doorways as if trying to listen. And Lady Violet watched Poirot now with the wary gaze of someone who feared not guilt but exposure. Poirot returned to the study and wrote a single line in his notebook. One of them knew about the clock. The others are pretending they didn't. Chapter 8. A Secondary Mystery. Hush of snow still blanketed the estate when Poirot and Inspector Higgins ascended the creaking stairs to the third floor just after dawn. The corridor smelled of dust and old wood polish, and the grandfather clock Evelyn had mentioned stood like a silent sentinel. At the far end, its pendulum long still, its chimes silent. Poirot crouched beside the clock, running his gloved fingers along its base. "Here," he murmured. "A narrow groove. The panel slides, not swings, with a subtle push and a soft click. A portion of the wall behind the clock shifted open. Higgins stepped forward, whistling low. Inside was a shallow compartment, lined in velvet and nearly empty save for a small leather-bound book and a delicate velvet pouch, identical to the one the brass key had been found in. Poirot lifted the pouch first and opened it carefully. It was empty, then the journal. He flipped through the pages slowly. Sir Edward's handwriting was precise, spidery, but confident. Most entries were mundane weather reports, meetings, notes about finances. But in the last 3 pages, the tone changed. Poirot read aloud, "I no longer trust Georgina. She's grown evasive. I suspect she's been siphoning small amounts cleverly disguised in the investments. Felix asked for money again. Says it's for art, but I suspect he gambles. I found Lady Violet by the clock yesterday. She claims she was looking for a draft, but the compartment was ajar. Did she find the letter?" Poirot paused. "Which letter?" Higgins asked Dot before Poirot could respond. A commotion erupted below hurried footsteps, a sharp cry, and then the slam of a door. Poirot and Higgins rushed down the stairs. In the main hall, the butler looked pale. "It's Miss Cecily, sir. She's in the morning room. Says someone tried to poison her." Poirot's eyes flashed. "Come quickly." They entered the morning room to find Cecily seated on a chaise, shaking. Dr. Finch knelt beside her, holding her wrist, while Evelyn hovered nearby. Clearly rattled, she drank from her tea, Evelyn said quickly, and within seconds she started coughing. Her lips turned pale. "It's subsiding," Dr. Finch said, rising. "The symptoms suggest belladonna. Fortunately, it was a trace amount, not enough to be lethal." Poirot turned to Higgins. "Belladonna is fast-acting. Someone wanted to scare her or silence her." The teacup sat on a tray near the fire, the remaining liquid dark and slightly cloudy. Poirot bent to sniff it. "Bitter," he said. "And the pot?" "Brought from the kitchen," Evelyn answered. "But I poured the tea for both of us from the same pot." "Yet only Cecily was affected?" Poirot asked. "Yes." He turned to Cecily, who was regaining some color. "Mademoiselle, had you discovered something? Something that made you dangerous?" She nodded faintly. "Last night, I went into the winter garden. I just needed to think. That's when I noticed footprints under the snow, faint, but leading away from the side door." "To where?" "To the stables." Poirot's brow furrowed. "At what time?" "Just after midnight. And you didn't mention this before?" "I wasn't sure it mattered." "It always matters," Poirot said gently. "And if someone saw you there, they may have feared what else you saw." He stood and addressed Higgins. "Someone is trying to shift our focus. They want us chasing the wrong ghosts. Could this be retaliation?" Higgins asked. "For what we found in the clock?" "Perhaps," Poirot said. "Or perhaps the murderer feared what Cecily might uncover next." He turned back to Evelyn. "You poured the tea?" "Yes." "Was the tray brought in freshly prepared?" "No. It was left in the corridor outside the morning room. I fetched it myself." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Then the poison could have been introduced while it sat unattended." Evelyn looked startled. "You think it was meant for her before I brought it in?" "I think," Poirot said slowly, "that whoever tampered with it assumed the first person to drink would be alone." Cecily flinched. "So I wasn't the target." Poirot said nothing, but the thought hung in the air. Later, back in the study, Poirot opened the journal again. Between the pages, almost hidden in the crease, was a folded slip of paper. He carefully unfolded it, a letter, handwritten and unsigned. The secret must stay buried. You promised me it would. If you go through with the will, I will make everything public. You will lose everything: your dignity, your legacy, your control. The handwriting was faintly familiar, but not Sir Edward's. Poirot held it up to the firelight. The ink shimmered dark green dot, just like the anonymous note he had received. A second mystery had blossomed from the first, and with it, another layer of deception. Chapter 9. Hidden Connections. Be mid-morning. The atmosphere in Davenport Hall had shifted noticeably. The poisoning attempt on Cecily had shaken what little composure the household still possessed. Whispers had begun in corridors, doors were shut a bit too quickly, and glances exchanged with guarded hesitancy. Poirot sensed it as clearly as the change in the weather. Something was unraveling. He returned to the study and laid the unsigned letter beside the journal, studying the green ink more closely under the desk lamp. The script was fluid, slightly slanted, with a faint upward flick at the end of most strokes. Poirot had seen handwriting like this before, but where? He was still deep in thought when Inspector Higgins entered, carrying a crumpled slip of paper in a waxed evidence pouch. Found this behind the piano in the music room, Higgins said. The housemaid was sweeping and noticed it tucked between the baseboard and the wall. Poirot opened the pouch and flattened the note carefully. It was brief, but unmistakable in tone. She knows about the ledger. If she speaks to him before the gala, everything ends. It must be moved immediately. Another anonymous message. Higgins muttered, "None." Poirot said softly, eyes narrowing, "Not anonymous. Look at the loop of the L and the flourish on the final Y. The same writer as the letter I found in the journal." He paused. "But this one is older. The paper is yellowed at the edges. Perhaps weeks, even months." He held both notes side by side. "It's the same person, and they are growing careless." Higgins tapped his chin. "So what's this ledger they mention?" Poirot stood, folding the paper carefully. "I suspect it refers to Sir Edward's private financial records. If Georgina Roke was indeed siphoning money, as he suspected, that ledger might contain damning proof. And if someone else knew about it," Higgins added, "they'd have every reason to ensure it disappeared." Poirot nodded. "Let us speak again with Georgina. But first, I wish to test a theory, rather than confront Georgina directly." Poirot requested Evelyn and Cecily to join him in the gallery and upstairs chamber, filled with family portraits and narrow windows that overlooked the east lawn. Both women arrived with visible tension in their posture, yet it was Cecily who spoke first. "Have you found something?" she asked. "Something curious," Poirot replied. "Tell me, mademoiselle, do either of you recognize this?" He held out the unsigned letter from the journal. Cecily shook her head, but Evelyn leaned forward, squinting. "That handwriting," Evelyn whispered. "It looks like Georgina's, or at least similar. I've seen her notes to the staff. Interesting." Poirot said, "And the ink?" "Green. She uses it often. She says black ink is to final." "Merci," he said, with a small smile. "That confirms what I suspected. But what does the letter mean?" Cecily asked. Poirot studied her for a long moment. "It means someone was threatening your uncle emotionally and financially, and they were confident enough to put it in writing." The silence stretched. Poirot added gently, "Mademoiselle Evelyn, I have another question. When you said earlier that Sir Edward was distant, was that always true?" She looked caught off guard. "Well, yes. He was never cruel, but he never treated me like family either." Poirot tilted his head. "And yet, you inherited a third of the estate." According to Georgina's unfiled revisions to the will, Cecily looked sharply at Evelyn. "What? I didn't know," Evelyn said quickly. "I had no idea until now." Poirot gave a slight bow. "Then forgive me for being the bearer of such knowledge. But it is important. You see, Sir Edward may not have shown affection with words, but his intentions. They were clear. The tension between the two young women shifted, ceaselessly uncertain. Evelyn quietly stunned. Poirot excused himself and returned to the study, where he found the housekeeper, Mrs. Alden, dusting the sideboard. "Pardon, madam," Poirot said, "but may I ask, have you seen anyone entering Sir Edward's office late at night before his death?" Mrs. Alden hesitated. "Well, I shouldn't say, but yes, Miss Roke, once or twice, after supper, when most were in the drawing-room. She said it was estate business." "And did she ever leave with papers?" "I saw her with a bundle once," the housekeeper admitted. "Bound with twine. Merci," Poirot said, eyes lighting slightly. That afternoon, Poirot asked Georgina Roke to meet him alone in the study. She arrived in a crisp navy blouse and slate skirt, her lips tight, her manner brisk. "You asked for me?" she said. Poirot gestured to the chair across from him. "Oui, please." Once she sat. He placed both notes, the letter and the one found behind the piano, on the desk between them. "These are yours," he said. She didn't touch them. "I don't know what you mean." Poirot lifted one brow. "Then allow me to clarify. The ink is yours. The handwriting is yours. And the subject, the ledger, is yours too." She still said nothing. "You see, mademoiselle, Sir Edward suspected financial misconduct. He noted it in his private journal. But I believe you discovered this suspicion before the will was finalized and you acted." Her jaw clenched. "You think I killed him?" "I think," Poirot said slowly, "that you had motive. But whether you acted on it remains to be proven." She stood abruptly. "I've nothing more to say." "As you wish," Poirot said calmly. "But I warn you, when the truth comes, it rarely knocks twice." After she left, Poirot walked to the window and looked out across the snow-covered grounds. Beneath the pristine surface, rot was blooming, connections hidden like roots beneath frost. He reached into his coat pocket and withdrew the brass key again, holding it up to the light. "What do you open?" he murmured. "A secret chamber? A box of lies?" Then he smiled. "Or perhaps a truth someone buried too soon." Chapter 10. Poirot's secret clue house was unusually still that evening. A hush had settled across Davenport Hall, not just from the snow that muffled the windows, but from the tension thickening in every corridor. Poirot moved quietly through the drawing-room after dinner, his hands behind his back, eyes flicking to the smallest details, the angle of a chair, the slant of a curtain cord, the faintest trace of a muddy heel on the Persian carpet. The guests were scattered, but restless. Georgina had retreated early to her room. Felix smoked near the garden doors, pacing like a caged animal. Lady Violet wrote steadily in the parlor, her gloved hands never pausing. Cecily and Evelyn were seated near the piano, whispering, although Poirot noted, not in the easy manner of shared confidence. It was the whispering of people who knew they were being watched. But Poirot was not focused on them. He was focused on the key dot after his conversation with Georgina and the discovery of the ledgers. Mention in the journal. Poirot had been struck by a realization, small but significant. The pouch in which the key was found. The velvet, the drawstring. He had seen another one. Not just similar but identical. Not in Sir Edward's possession, but in the linen cabinet in the West Wing. It had been used to store heirloom silver teaspoons. The crest embossed faintly into the velvet, a stylized thistle flanked by two vines. The Davenport family emblem. And yet the pouch found in Sir Edward's hand, the one holding the key, bore no crest. Poirot returned quietly to the linen cabinet and retrieved a pouch for comparison. As he expected, same color, same size, same texture, but different origin. The one in Sir Edward's hand had no emblem, no family crest, just a faint perfume lingering in the lining, a floral scent, delicate, unmistakably feminine. Not Lady Violet's strong rosewater, not Evelyn's soap-scrubbed linens, but something subtler, jasmine. Poirot returned to the study and opened his small travel case. From the side pouch, he retrieved a folded white linen handkerchief found earlier near the drawing-room door. It, too, smelled faintly of jasmine, and stitched in its corner, almost invisible in ivory thread, was a small, elegant monogram, C.D. Cecily Davenport. So then how had Cecily's pouch ended up holding the key found on Sir Edward's body? Poirot sat quietly, turning the handkerchief in his fingers. There was no evidence that Cecily had murdered her uncle, and yet this pouch, this detail, so easily overlooked, had not come from his desk, nor from his drawer. It had come from her belongings. He tapped the brass key lightly on the desk. If Cecily had stored the key in her pouch, then at some point recently she had it in her possession, perhaps even before the murder. Yet when asked, she had claimed to only recognize it vaguely. From her childhood, no mention of having handled it, no acknowledgement of the pouch.ali. But why? The implications branched like a spider's web. If she had the key, then perhaps she had planned to confront Sir Edward about her inheritance, about something buried. But if so, why deny it? Unless someone else knew she had the key, someone who used that knowledge to frame her, or silence her. A soft knock at the door broke his thoughts. Inspector Higgins entered, looking tired. "Evening. I've just checked in on the staff again. No one saw or heard anything new." Poirot nodded. "Merci, mon ami. I must admit," Higgins added, "I keep circling back to Felix. That man's always lurking, always vague, but no proof." "Ah," Poirot said with a faint smile. "But one must not be too distracted by shadows. Sometimes the most dangerous person is the one who never changes their rhythm." "Meaning?" Poirot rose and walked to the mantel. "Meaning Lady Violet," he said quietly. "Throughout this affair, her demeanor has remained impeccably composed, polite, cool, even affectionate, but always curated." "You think she's involved?" "I think she knew about the ledger," Poirot replied. "I think she knew about Sir Edward's intention to change the will, and I think she had access to the east corridor, to the study, to the pouch." "But Cecily's handkerchief could have been stolen," Poirot said, "or borrowed. The jasmine scent lingers, yes, but so do fingerprints. Perhaps even fibers. The smallest clue can betray the grandest lie." Higgins frowned. "So what's the next move?" Poirot tapped the key one final time on the desk. "We test the key, not metaphorically, literally, early the next morning." Poirot made his way to the cellar with Higgins and the estate's caretaker. Mr. Lyle, a locked storage door, rarely used, sat beneath the south stairwell, its handle ancient. The lock mechanism rusted with age. Poirot inserted the brass key. It turned, with a long creak. The door opened to reveal a narrow chamber lined with old trunks, file boxes, and cobweb-streaked wine racks. In the far corner sat a locked strongbox, its leather cracked with time. Poirot knelt and opened it. Inside were documents, dozens of them, letters, receipts, and ledgers. Atop the pile, a sealed envelope, marked in Sir Edward's handwriting, "To be opened upon my death by Hercule Poirot only." Poirot opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a single page. "If you have found this, then I am likely gone. One among them is capable of much more than I ever believed. I feared naming them, but the truth is inside the strongbox. It contains everything: the blackmail, the account books, and the correspondence that proves motive. I trust you will see clearly what I could not admit aloud." Poirot closed the letter carefully and looked at Higgins. "The game," he said softly, "is nearly over." Chapter 11. Tension's recent events of the past few days had pulled the threads of tension so taut that they now threatened to snap. Poirot sat in the drawing room, the fire casting flickering shadows against the cold stone walls, while Inspector Higgins paced restlessly in front of the window. Outside, the snow had begun to fall once again. but the chill within the house seemed far more palpable than the winter air itself. Poirot's fingers drummed steadily on the arm of his chair, his mind spinning the web of connections, secrets, and lies that had begun to intertwine around the Davenport family. Each suspect had been carefully examined, each clue turned over and scrutinized. But the final revelation, that elusive truth, remained just out of reach. Lady Violet, Cecily, Georgina, Felix, and Evelyn all had been questioned. Each had their own story, their own justifications, and their own version of events. But somewhere, hidden beneath their words, Poirot knew there was a pattern, a thread he hadn't yet pulled. His instinct, that sharp, finely tuned sense of human behavior, told him the time was near. The time to reveal the truth was almost upon them. He glanced at Higgins. "Inspector, it seems we have reached a crossroads." Higgins stopped pacing and turned to face him. "Do you have it then?" "The answer?" Poirot shook his head. "Not yet, mon ami, but we are getting closer. I feel the pressure building in each one of them, the guilt, the fear, the desire to shield themselves from exposure. And the way they are reacting tells me that the killer is growing desperate." Higgins rubbed his brow. "It's like they think we've forgotten about the key. Whoever left it in Sir Edward's hand must have assumed we'd be fixated on it." Poirot smiled faintly. "Ah, but that is precisely the trap they wanted me to fall into. The key is not the answer, it is merely part of the puzzle. The real story lies in what it opened, and more importantly, in the relationships between the people in this house." Higgins was about to speak when a knock at the door interrupted them. A moment later, Cecily entered, her expression as guarded as ever. The tension between them had thickened after Poirot's conversation with Evelyn earlier that day. Cecily's eyes darted around the room, unsure of her reception, but she stepped forward nonetheless. "Monsieur Poirot, Inspector Higgins," she said, her voice tight. "I need to speak with you." Poirot gestured for her to take a seat. "Of course, mademoiselle. What is it you wish to say?" Cecily hesitated for a moment before speaking, her gaze flicking nervously between Poirot and Higgins. I know this must be difficult for you, trying to untangle everything, but I need you to understand something." She took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. "I didn't kill my uncle, but I think I know who did." Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. "You know?" "Not for certain," she said quickly, "but I have my suspicions. I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened, and I've realized something." Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but sharp. "What is it you've realized?" Cecily's hands wrung in her lap. "I saw something that night after Sir Edward's body was found. I saw Lady Violet talking to Georgina in the hallway. They were speaking in hushed tones, but I overheard part of it. Georgina was telling Lady Violet that she had moved something that could expose them both." Poirot's mind began to race, fitting this new piece of the puzzle into the growing image. Moved something? What was it? Cecily shook her head. "I couldn't hear exactly, but it sounded like something important. Something to do with Sir Edward's will, perhaps. I don't know if they were planning to change it or destroy it, but the way they spoke, it was as though they were trying to hide something dangerous." Poirot took a moment to absorb her words. "And you didn't mention this before?" "I didn't want to believe it," Cecily said quietly. "I thought it was just my imagination. But now I can't ignore it. I know what I heard." Poirot rose from his chair and walked over to the window. His mind was already turning over the implications of Cecily's confession. Lady Violet and Georgina working together to hide something important, something connected to Sir Edward's will. It was a plausible theory, but was it enough to uncover the truth? He turned back to Cecily. "Mademoiselle, your honesty is appreciated, but you must understand I can only act on what is proven, not on speculation." "I know," Cecily whispered, her eyes downcast. I needed to tell you." Poirot nodded slowly. "Thank you." Cecily stood to leave, but before she reached the door, Poirot spoke again. "One last thing, mademoiselle. You mentioned something earlier. The letter from your uncle, was it ever found?" Cecily's face paled. "The letter? What letter?" "The one Sir Edward mentioned in his journal. The one that had been hidden. Did you ever see it?" Cecily froze, her breath catching in her throat. I don't know what you're talking about." Poirot's gaze held hers, unblinking. "You've seen it, haven't you? You knew your uncle was suspicious of Georgina and Lady Violet. You must have known there was something hidden in this house." Cecily's hands trembled. "I don't know where it is," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "But I've heard them talk about it. About something being moved." I didn't want to believe it. Poirot's heart skipped a beat. He had a sudden, visceral feeling that they were on the cusp of uncovering something far darker than he had anticipated. The connections between the guests, the hidden letter, the whispered conversations, it was all starting to fall into place. He turned back to Higgins, who had been observing quietly. "Inspector, it seems we must search Sir Edward's study once again." Higgins nodded grimly. "You think we've missed something?" Poirot smiled faintly, his eyes gleaming with determination. "I think it's time we looked in the right place." The study was quiet when they returned, the heavy oak desk still as it had been the night before. But Poirot's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of truth. The ledger, the key, the hidden letter, it was all connected, each thread leading toward a single point. Whoever had planned Sir Edward's death had not only manipulated the will, but had also hidden the evidence in plain sight. As he moved toward the desk, his fingers brushed the edge of a drawer he had overlooked before. He pulled it open. There, inside, hidden beneath a pile of documents, was the letter, Sir Edward's handwriting, unmistakable, and underneath it, a sealed envelope addressed to Poirot. Chapter 12. The confrontation study was quieter than ever, the flickering light from the fire casting long shadows over the worn leather chair and Sir Edward's meticulously organized desk. Poirot stood motionless for a moment, eyes fixed on the sealed envelope resting in his hand. The handwriting was unmistakable, Sir Edward's own, clear and deliberate, but the presence of his name only made the moment more tense. He had already unearthed several secrets in this house, but now the letter addressed to him promised to unveil the final layer. With a deliberate motion, Poirot opened the envelope, his fingers brushing the fine paper within. Inside, he found a single sheet, hastily written in Sir Edward's usual, precise script. "If you are reading this, then my fears have come to pass. The key I left behind is not only for the truth of my death, it is for something far darker. One among the people you have already met is not what they seem. There's more to this death than simple greed or inheritance. The key you hold unlocks a chamber in the estate, a room that has remained sealed for decades. It holds the answers to everything. But beware, do not trust those who have known me longest. Trust only yourself and the small gray cells you possess." Poirot placed the letter down carefully and glanced up at Higgins, who had been silently observing. The weight of the moment hung thick in the air. "Well?" Higgins asked, his voice low with suspicion. "Do you know who did it?" Poirot stood up, folding the letter with deliberate precision. "Non, mon ami, not yet. But this letter confirms much of what I suspected. Sir Edward knew someone in this house was playing a dangerous game." Higgins frowned. "So the key, it's not just some symbolic trinket." Poirot shook his head. "It is much more. It opens something tangible, something hidden. The room Sir Edward refers to, what could he have meant by it?" The two men exchanged a glance. The study was growing colder, the shadows deepening. A heavy silence fell between them, broken only by the crackling of the fire. But Poirot's mind was already several steps ahead. He had the pieces now, it was time to put them together. "Let us proceed," Poirot said, his voice resolute. "The room Sir Edward speaks of must be the one hidden in the east wing, the one that no one speaks of." "The one that no one has ever opened," Higgins said, his voice thick with understanding. Poirot nodded, turning toward the door. "Indeed. It is time to see what secrets it holds." The east wing of the house felt more oppressive than ever. The halls were dim, the wallpaper peeling, and the air was tinged with dust and the faint scent of decay. Poirot led the way, his every step measured, while Higgins followed, his hands clenched at his sides. They came to a stop in front of a heavy wooden door, adorned with faded carvings of vines and thistles, an ornate but tired relic of a forgotten past. Poirot placed his hand on the handle and gave a slight turn. The door creaked open. Inside was a small, dark room, barely more than a closet. But it was the contents of the room that caught Poirot's attention. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with dusty boxes and papers. But in the center, on a small pedestal, sat a large, locked chest, its brass fittings worn with age. "This is it," Poirot murmured, stepping closer. "This is what Sir Edward wanted us to find." Higgins stepped forward, glancing around the room. "But why keep it locked away? Why not just tell us what it is?" Poirot gave a slight shake of his head. "It was never meant to be found. But Sir Edward left us clues. The key, the letter, it was all part of a plan, a final message. He didn't trust anyone in this house, not even his closest family." Poirot's fingers brushed the lock of the chest, examining it carefully. It was old, rusted, but still functional. He turned to Higgins. "The key, please." Higgins produced the brass key from his pocket and handed it to Poirot. With a decisive motion, Poirot slid the key into the lock, turning it slowly. There was a faint click, and the chest opened with a soft creak. Inside, the contents were not what they had expected. There were no hidden treasures or documents, no incriminating evidence or family secrets. Instead, it was filled with photographs, thousands of them. Sir Edward's face appeared in nearly every shot, always accompanied by different people, standing together in various locations across the estate. There were family portraits, casual snapshots, but all had one thing in common: each person in the photographs seemed to have aged unnaturally fast, their faces twisted in expressions of fear or pain. Poirot's eyes flicked over the images, his mind working swiftly. These photographs, there's something unnatural about them. The faces, they're too distorted. The way time has treated them is... He trailed off, studying the first photograph more closely. The figure beside Sir Edward in the image looked strangely familiar. It was Lady Violet. Higgins stepped closer. "What's wrong with her face?" Poirot's brow furrowed. "It's not just the photograph. Look at the date. This one is from several decades ago. She hasn't aged like the others. In fact, she looks nearly identical." "Impossible," Higgins muttered. Poirot flipped through more photographs, his fingers shaking slightly as he looked at the faces, each one familiar, yet different. There were pictures of Sir Edward, Lady Violet, and even Cecily, each one seemingly frozen in time. But the more Poirot examined the photographs, the clearer it became. The people in these images were not the same as those in the house now. They had the same faces, the same expressions, but they weren't the same people. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured under his breath. "What is it?" Higgins asked urgently. Poirot's eyes widened as the final piece clicked into place. "This isn't just about inheritance, Inspector. It's about something far more sinister. These people, this family, they aren't who they say they are. They never were." The realization hit him like a wave. The distortions in the photos, the unnatural aging, the strange connections between them, it was all connected. But what was the secret they had been hiding all these years? The answer, Poirot realized, was simple. The key didn't just unlock a room. It unlocked the truth, and that truth would change everything. Chapter 13. A desperate attempt to escape. Heath's discovery in the hidden room had shaken Poirot to his core, but he masked it well. As Higgins stared at the photographs in stunned silence, Poirot began to piece together what had been left obscured for so long. The faces in those images were not just distorted, they were echoes of the same people, yet not quite the same. There was something fundamentally wrong about the way the family had aged, or rather, had not aged. With a soft exhale, Poirot closed the chest and locked it again. The brass key, now heavy in his pocket, seemed to pulse with secrets. "We need to act quickly," Poirot said, his voice tight with urgency. "It is not only a matter of inheritance anymore. This is something more dangerous, more ancient." Higgins looked at him, still struggling to wrap his mind around the photographs. "What do you mean? How can they not have aged like normal people?" Poirot stood, his gaze distant. "We are dealing with something far more insidious than a simple murder. Sir Edward was trying to protect us from it. And now the one who wishes to hide the truth will do anything to ensure it stays buried." Higgins blinked. "You think they're willing to kill again?" Poirot's lips curled into a grim smile. "Mon ami, they are already preparing to escape." At that moment, a loud commotion came from the hallway, followed by a shout. Poirot's instincts flared immediately, and he rushed out of the study, Higgins close behind. The source of the noise was coming from the main staircase, where Cecily was being restrained by two of the house staff. "Let me go," Cecily cried, her face pale and her eyes wide with fear. "I have to leave. You don't understand. They'll come for me, they'll kill me." Poirot approached her slowly, his gaze steady. "Mademoiselle, what is this madness? Why do you wish to leave?" She looked up at him, her expression desperate. "I know what you found. I know what's in that room. The photographs, their faces. I knew something was wrong all along, but I never wanted to believe it. I thought it was just some family curse. But now I see. Now I know. And they'll stop at nothing to protect their secret." "Who will?" Poirot pressed, stepping closer. "Them." Cecily's voice trembled with terror. "Lady Violet, Georgina, all of them, they're not human anymore. They've been living for years and years, and they've kept it all hidden, all this time. They can't let anyone know the truth. That's why they killed him. They killed Sir Edward to silence him." Poirot's brow furrowed, his eyes narrowing. "Cecily, you must calm yourself. I understand your fear, but we cannot make decisions in haste. You have no proof for these wild accusations. I know." She sobbed, her body shaking. "But I saw the journals. I found them in the library, hidden behind the bookshelves. They said it all, their secret, their pact, it's in there. The whole family, bound together for immortality." Poirot's heart skipped a beat. "Where are these journals?" Cecily stopped struggling and looked at him, her eyes wide with both fear and hope. I burned them. I couldn't take it anymore. I thought if I destroyed them, the curse would stop. But now they're coming for me." Poirot took a step back, his mind racing. The mention of the journals, combined with Cecily's panic, made him realize the depth of the deception. Sir Edward had known, had written it all down. And now Cecily had inadvertently destroyed the only tangible evidence. But something about her words nagged at him. The family had been bound together for immortality, an unsettling notion. What did Cecily mean by this? What kind of pact had they made? "Inspector Higgins," Poirot said, his voice firm, "secure the house. No one leaves. There's something here that is far worse than any of us have yet imagined. We are dealing with a conspiracy that goes beyond murder." Higgins nodded quickly, stepping into the hallway to begin his task. Meanwhile, Poirot turned to Cecily, who was now sitting against the wall, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees. "Mademoiselle," he said gently, "if you wish to leave, you may, but I urge you to stay. There are far more dangerous forces at work here than you realize." She looked up at him, her eyes filled with doubt. "And what about them? What about Lady Violet and Georgina? What are they going to do?" Poirot hesitated before answering. "We shall see. But for now, you are safer here. Just as he finished speaking, there was a knock at the door. A tall figure entered. Felix Harwood, looking disheveled, with wild eyes. Poirot Higgins. Felix cried, his voice trembling. You have to stop them. They're planning something terrible. I saw Lady Violet, Georgina, and even Evelyn talking in the library. They were saying something about the family's old ways, about keeping everything hidden. I don't know what it means, but it's not good. I heard them mention secrets, things they've been hiding for generations. Poirot's mind immediately snapped into focus. Everything was falling into place now. The unusual aging, the strange photographs, the eerie calm of Lady Violet and Georgina. It was all tied to something far more ancient than a mere inheritance dispute. Felix, you've done well to bring this information, Poirot said, his voice low and measured. But I need you to do something for me. Take Cecily and stay in the drawing room. Do not leave until I return. Understand? Felix nodded, though his face was pale with fear. What about you? What are you going to do? I will confront them, Poirot said. I will put an end to this. Poirot moved quickly through the halls of the estate, his mind racing. He had to act now before the family could destroy the evidence, before they could silence any more witnesses. His steps were purposeful as he made his way toward the library, where he knew the answers to Sir Edward's secret awaited. Lady Violet, Georgina, and Evelyn were there, gathered in a tense circle near the fireplace. Their faces were hard, determined. But as Poirot entered, they all turned toward him, their eyes narrowing. You've been busy, Poirot, Lady Violet said, her voice smooth but tinged with something darker. I hope you've enjoyed your little investigation, but I think it's time to end it. Poirot didn't flinch. He stood tall, his gaze sharp and unwavering. End it? No, madam. The truth is not something one can simply end. It will always find its way to the surface. And what is this truth? Georgina spat. That we are immortal? That we have lived for generations? Poirot nodded slowly. Yes, that is the truth, and it is something I now intend to expose. The room fell silent as the weight of his words settled over them. Lady Violet smiled coldly. You think you can stop us? We've done this for centuries. You think you can defeat us now? Poirot's expression remained calm. I don't need to defeat you, madam. The truth will do that for me. As the tension in the room thickened, Poirot knew it was only a matter of time before the final pieces of this deadly puzzle fell into place. Chapter 14. The final piece falls into place. Tension in the library was so thick it could have been cut with a knife. Poirot stood at the center of the room, his eyes unwavering as they locked with the three women now standing before him, Lady Violet, Georgina, and Evelyn. Each of them, for all their outward composure, was now clearly on edge. The silence was heavy, oppressive, as if the very walls of the room were holding their breath. Lady Violet's lips curled into a tight smile, though it barely reached her eyes. I see you've uncovered our secret, Poirot, she said softly, her voice like silk, yet laced with an undercurrent of something darker. You've pieced it all together, haven't you? Poirot didn't respond immediately. Instead, he studied each of them carefully, his mind whirring as the final pieces of the puzzle slid into place. The photographs, the unnatural aging, the mentions of the ledger, and Cecily's frantic warnings, everything had led him here, to this moment. But what he had uncovered was far more than just a simple family secret. What he had discovered was a truth so terrifying that it transcended the boundaries of time itself. He glanced at Georgina, who stood with her arms crossed tightly. She was watching him with a mixture of resentment and resignation. But there was also something more in her eyes, a fear, a flicker of doubt, as if she had begun to realize that their carefully constructed world was beginning to collapse. Evelyn, too, stood still, her eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and guilt. She had been the youngest of the group, the one most likely to have been manipulated. Yet there was a quiet resolve in her expression now. She was beginning to understand that she, too, had been a pawn in something much larger than herself. Poirot's gaze moved back to Lady Violet, who was the true orchestrator of it all. She had been the one to carefully control the family's secrets, to ensure that everything remained hidden from the world. But now, with Poirot standing before her, those secrets were starting to unravel. "You've been hiding something for far too long," Poirot said, his voice calm but firm. "It's not just a matter of inheritance, is it? It's something far more permanent." Lady Violet's smile faltered, but only for a moment. "You don't understand," she said, her voice now colder. "You never could. We've been living in the shadows for centuries, preserving our legacy, our bloodline. This family, our family, is different. We are not like other people, different." Poirot repeated, his voice low. "You are not immortal, Lady Violet. You have simply made a pact that comes at a price." Lady Violet's eyes flashed with something dangerously close to fury. "Don't be absurd. We are not bound by time the same way you are. We've learned to extend our lives to preserve them. The secrets we've kept are for our survival, for our strength. They are what has allowed us to endure, to thrive while others wither." Poirot's gaze never wavered. "You've found a way to prolong your lives," he said, almost thoughtfully. "But at what cost? You've sacrificed your very humanity in exchange for the so-called immortality. You're no longer alive in the way people are meant to be. You've become something else, something that cannot be explained by science or reason." Georgina's voice interrupted him, sharp and cutting. "What do you know of it? You think we're monsters, don't you? That we've done something unnatural. But what choice did we have? You can't possibly understand the burden of this life, Poirot. The years, the centuries, the isolation, the fear of discovery." Poirot remained silent for a moment, his eyes scanning the faces of the three women. There was a sadness in his expression now, a realization that the world they had crafted for themselves, the power they had fought to maintain, was crumbling before them. He could see it in the way they stood defensive, on edge as if they were waiting for the final blow. But Poirot wasn't about to give them the satisfaction of an immediate accusation. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small leather-bound journal. It was Sir Edward's journal, the one that had been hidden away for so long, the one that contained the details of the family's pact, the truth about their so-called immortality. He opened it carefully, scanning the pages until he found the entry that had set everything in motion. "They have come to me again, asking for more. They never stop, but I will not give in. The power they wield, the hold they have over me, it is no longer enough. I must end this. I will find a way to break the cycle. I must destroy the bloodline, sever the bond before it is too late. But I cannot do it alone. I must trust someone. But who?" Poirot paused, his finger resting on the page. He had suspected it all along, but now it was clear. Sir Edward had known the truth. He had known about the pact, about the price his family had paid for their so-called immortality, and he had been trying to end it, to destroy the bloodline before it could spread any further. But someone had stopped him. Someone had killed Sir Edward to protect the secret, to ensure that the cycle would continue. Poirot closed the journal and looked up at the women. His voice was calm, but there was a deep sadness in it now. "You didn't want to live forever. You didn't want immortality. You wanted control. You wanted power. And you were willing to do anything to preserve it." Lady Violet stepped forward, her face hardening. "You don't understand. We didn't choose this. It was done to us generations ago. The curse was cast upon us, and we've been bound by it ever since. But now we have the chance to break free. We have the power to live as we choose, without fear of death, without the burden of time." Poirot's expression softened slightly, though his voice remained firm. "And in doing so, you have condemned others. You've taken away their right to live as they are meant to." Lady Violet's face twisted in a mixture of rage and desperation. "You don't know what it's like. The loneliness, the pain of watching the world pass you by, of knowing that you will outlive everyone you love. You think we've had a choice?" Poirot shook his head. "No, no one ever has a choice when it comes to life and death. But you chose to play with fate. You chose to defy the natural order, and now you must face the consequences." A silence fell over the room as the weight of Poirot's words hung in the air. Lady Violet, Georgina, and Evelyn stood motionless, their faces unreadable. Then, without warning, Evelyn stepped forward. "What will happen to us now?" she asked, her voice shaking. Poirot looked at her, his eyes searching her face. "I do not know, but I do know this: no matter how long you live, no matter how much power you wield, you cannot escape the truth. The truth will always catch up with you." Evelyn's shoulders slumped, and for the first time, she looked truly vulnerable. The mask of indifference she had worn so well was slipping away. Poirot turned to Higgins, who had been standing quietly at the doorway, watching the exchange. "Inspector, it is time." Higgins nodded and moved toward the door, signaling to the rest of the authorities who had been waiting outside. The arrest would come soon, but Poirot knew it wasn't just the physical evidence that would bring an end to this family's reign. It was the truth that had been hidden for so long, buried beneath lies, deceit, and manipulation. As the authorities entered, Poirot turned back to Lady Violet, Georgina, and Evelyn, his eyes softening with a hint of pity. "You had your chance," he said quietly. "But now the cycle ends." Chapter 15. The final gathering. The rest had been swift. Poirot, with his quiet authority, had laid the truth bare, and the police had moved in quickly to apprehend Lady Violet, Georgina, and Evelyn. The web they had so carefully constructed over generations was crumbling in front of their eyes, and though the women had fought back with defiance, the weight of Poirot's deductions had left them little room to maneuver. Now, in the sitting room, Poirot stood at the center, watching as the suspects were gathered together, this time not for another round of interrogation, but for the final revelation. Lady Violet, Georgina, and Evelyn sat on one side of the room, their expressions a mixture of anger, fear, and resignation. They had been escorted from the library to this private room under strict watch, their futures now uncertain, their secrets no longer safe. Higgins stood nearby, his gaze sharp as he kept an eye on the proceedings. The room was still, save for the faint ticking of a clock on the mantel and the low crackle of the fire. The scene was eerily quiet, as if everyone in the room was waiting for the storm to break. Poirot moved toward the hearth, his hands clasped behind his back. He didn't speak immediately, giving the women time to absorb the enormity of the situation. Their fate was sealed. They could feel it in the air, thick with the certainty of what was about to unfold. Finally, Poirot spoke, his voice calm, yet heavy with finality. "Mesdames, messieurs, you are all aware that your actions have led us to this moment. The truth is clear now, but it has not been easy to uncover. The truth is often buried deep within the fabric of lies, and it takes a mind of patience, of logic, to unravel it." Lady Violet's face was taut, her lips pursed as she stared at Poirot. "You think you've won, don't you?" she sneered. "You think you've exposed everything? But you don't understand. You can't understand what we've sacrificed to stay alive, to protect this family, to ensure our legacy. We are not like others. We are different." Poirot turned to her, his gaze steady. "None, madam. You are not different. You are bound, as all are, by the natural laws of life and death. You chose to defy those laws, and now you must face the consequences." Georgina spoke up, her voice clipped. "You're wrong, Poirot. You don't know what it's like. We didn't ask for this. We didn't choose it. The curse, the pact, it was thrust upon us long ago. We merely learned to survive it." Poirot's expression softened, though his tone remained firm. Survival, yes, but at what cost? You have lived for centuries, hiding in the shadows, feeding off the lives of others. Your immortality has come at the expense of your humanity. Evelyn, who had been silent until now, lifted her head. I never wanted this. I didn't know what it would mean, what it would cost. I only wanted to feel loved, to belong. I didn't understand the price. Poirot's eyes softened with a flicker of compassion. And that is the tragedy of it all, mademoiselle. You were all trapped in a cycle that was not of your making. But now, that cycle must be broken. Sir Edward knew this. He was trying to protect you in his own way. He wanted to end the cycle before it claimed more lives. Lady Violet's jaw tightened. You think you understand? You think you know what we've lived through? We've watched loved ones die, seen generations pass, and we've been left behind. Do you think that doesn't hurt? Do you think we didn't feel it? But we had no choice. The pact had been made. There was no escape. Poirot's voice grew firmer. You are wrong, madam. There is always a choice. Sir Edward made his choice. And now, so must you. Higgins stepped forward, his arms crossed over his chest. It's over, Violet. The game's up. You can't keep running from the truth. Lady Violet looked at him, her eyes cold, as though she were seeing him for the first time. You think you've won? You think the truth will save you? You don't know what you're up against. Poirot glanced at Higgins, then back to Lady Violet. The truth is the strongest weapon we have. It is the one thing that cannot be defeated, no matter how many lies you build around it. There was a long silence in the room as everyone processed his words. The reality of what was happening was finally beginning to sink in. The women, once so proud, now appeared fragile, shattered, in a way. The weight of their actions, the guilt, and the fear of facing their past sins were finally catching up with them. Poirot continued, his voice measured but resolute. You have all played a part in this tragic story. Lady Violet, your desire for power and control led you to manipulate those around you. Georgina, your greed for wealth and influence blinded you to the truth. Evelyn, your desperation for belonging clouded your judgment. And Sir Edward, in the end, could not bear the burden of it any longer. He tried to end it, but you stopped him. Georgina flinched at the mention of Sir Edward's name, her eyes darting to the floor. Evelyn, too, seemed to shrink into herself, her hands trembling slightly. Poirot's eyes softened as he looked at them, but his tone remained firm. You are all trapped by your own choices, by the pact your ancestors made long ago. But now, the truth has come. The game is over. Lady Violet's face twisted with a mix of bitterness and rage. You don't understand, Poirot. You never could. You're just a man bound by time. You'll never understand what it means to live as we have. Poirot's voice remained steady. Perhaps I do not understand fully, but I understand enough to know that what you have done is not life. It is a mockery of life. And now, that mockery must end. For a moment, the room was silent, save for the faint crackling of the fire. Then Lady Violet, her shoulders sagging, let out a long, resigned sigh. You're right. It's over. We cannot escape it anymore. We cannot hide from the truth. Georgina, who had been silent for a long time, finally spoke. And what will become of us? Poirot paused before answering, his gaze steady. The law will take its course. You will face the consequences of your actions. But I hope, for your sake, that you find a way to atone for what you've done. Evelyn, her voice small and uncertain, asked, and Sir Edward? What happens to him? Poirot looked at her, his eyes softening. Sir Edward will be remembered as a man who tried to protect you, who tried to end the cycle. His legacy will not be defined by the curse, but by the courage he showed in the end. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of the truth, but also with the possibility of redemption, however small. The cycle had been broken. The truth had been revealed. And now the women had to face the consequences of their actions. Poirot turned toward the door, signaling the end of the gathering. "It is time," he said quietly. "The final chapter of this story is now written." As the women were escorted away, Poirot stood still for a moment, watching them leave. It had been a long and difficult journey, but in the end, the truth had prevailed. The game was over, and for the first time in a long while, Poirot felt a sense of peace settle over him. The puzzle had been solved, the secrets revealed, and justice had been served. Chapter 16. The revealed morning following the arrests arrived with a dampened sense of finality. The once-spirited house of Davenport was now eerily quiet, save for the occasional shuffle of footsteps and the murmur of hushed conversations. Among the remaining staff, Poirot sat alone in the study, the fire now reduced to a few stubborn embers. His mind, though, was still working relentlessly, as it always did in the aftermath of a solved case. The pieces of the puzzle had been assembled, but now he had to see them in their full, unvarnished truth. The house, though eerily silent, seemed to hold its breath. He had witnessed the final unraveling of the Davenport family's dangerous secret. Yet there was something unsettling about the calm after the storm. It was as though the house itself had become a witness to all that had transpired, a silent observer to the downfall of those who had once lived within its walls. Poirot's fingers gently traced the edge of the desk as his thoughts wandered back to Lady Violet, Georgina, and Evelyn. They had fought to the end, each of them bound by their own version of the truth, by their belief that they had somehow earned their immortality, that their curse was justified by the centuries of life they had lived. But the truth, as always, was far simpler. They had stolen from the natural order, sacrificed their humanity in exchange for something far darker, and had kept the secret of their so-called immortality buried for generations. It had taken a keen mind, a steady hand, and relentless patience to untangle the web they had woven. But in the end, the truth had been exposed just as Poirot had known it would be. A soft knock at the door broke his reverie. "Enter," Poirot called. Inspector Higgins stepped into the room, his expression tired but resolute. "It's over, Poirot. We've processed everything. The statements from the remaining staff have been taken, and the women have been placed under guard while the case is reviewed. The authorities in London are already moving to secure everything. This is far from over. But for now, we've completed our part." Poirot nodded slowly, still deep in thought. "And the evidence we gathered from the hidden room?" "All secured," Higgins confirmed. "The photographs, the journals, the key, it's all been catalogued. We have the proof we need. But I think you're right. There's something more we need to address." Poirot's eyes lifted to Higgins, his gaze sharp. "What do you mean, Inspector?" Higgins hesitated for a moment, his hands clasped behind his back. "It's the letter, the one from Sir Edward, the one addressed to you." Poirot's brow furrowed. "The one in the strong box?" "Yes," Higgins said. It's clear now. Sir Edward had been planning his escape. He'd been planning to expose them long before the murder. But there's something we didn't realize until now." Poirot motioned for him to